So they finally get Chapman after spring training had already started. And then the question was, okay, what happens with JD Davis? JD Davis was the only player to actually beat the Giants in an arbitration case in years and years and years and years. Now, I think the Giants do a pretty good job of settling these cases before they actually go to arbitration. You don't see a lot of these things go to arbitration. So Jay Davis wins the arbitration case, and this was, weeks ago. And now we fast forward and we go, oh, we got Chapman. JD Davis is probably going to get traded. Who are we going to trade him to? Now, here's where it got really tricky because according to Farhan, there was no market for JD Davis. And then the question becomes, well, how is that so? He's a very productive ball player. I think the teams figured that the Giants were bluffing when they put him on waivers because the teams knew that there was this little hole in the clause and knew that more than likely the Giants were just going to unconditionally release him. Now, you and I, when we saw that they released him, we were like, what in the hell is going on? This is not something that we understand. And so we had to dig and we had to read, and thanks to Bags and thanks to Pavlovich and thanks to all of the people who really understood this and really kind of dug into the CBA and figured out what it was. So what it sounds like is in the latest CBA, what the players wanted was that these ARB cases that actually happened, they want that money to be guaranteed in some way. That's part of the 10% that I'm not sure I completely understand from the timeline level. But that is what they thought was a win in the new CBA, was something to do with arbitration and teams having to make that money guaranteed. So what happened is when the Giants released him, there is a hole in the process in which it is not guaranteed. The money is not guaranteed if you actually go to arbitration. If you actually strike the deal with the player before the case actually goes to arbitration, that money is guaranteed, but it's not if the case is actually decided. So let me read from Bags because he's going to explain it better than I can. I'm just going to read from his piece. He wrote, in a dramatic reversal of fortune, the Giants placed Davis on unconditional release waivers on Monday, cutting ties with a player who had won a $6.9 million salary when he beat them in an arbitration hearing in February. Because the provision in the CBA specifically does not guarantee arbitration salaries arrived at through a hearing, the Giants owe Davis just 30 days of termination pay, which amounts to little more than $1.1 million. So JD wins the arbitration case against the Giants. $6.9 million is his salary for this season. And the Giants, they released him, and all they're on the hook for is the termination pay. So they only paid $1.1 million out of that $6.9 million. Now, are you with me to that where we are now?
100%.
Okay.
And I'm sure you're probably going to get to the part too where he might have a grievance and might have a chance to file a grievance, but we'll see.
Yeah, well, we'll see now. From what I understand, the Mets, he could possibly be going back to the Mets. I saw something today that said the Mets are interested.
There's 6 other teams as well.
So. Okay, so back to Bags. Giants president of baseball operations, Farhan Zaidi, who appeared on a hastily arranged Zoom call with reporters on Monday, said the team attempted to trade Davis with no traction. That is where I'm just like, how? He's a valuable baseball player. Not everybody is happy with their team right now. Like, what's going on? So that was a question for me. The Giants placed Davis on outright waivers this past weekend in the hopes that another club would claim him and speed the process along. Now, this is the quote from Farhan. As soon as we got the word he went unclaimed on outright waivers, we decided to make this move. It just boils down to role and other guys we had ahead of JD in terms of at bats. If we had a 28 to 30 man roster, we'd keep everybody, blah, 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 blah. So that is the interesting thing to me is why didn't the Mets claim him when he was on waivers? Is it because they would have been on the hook for the full 6.9 and maybe they knew that the Giants, the flip side of the Giants was that they were just going to release him and that they could actually bring him in for a lower dollar amount? That's my question.
Yeah, I believe that's what it was, because it almost sounds like every GM saw this quote unquote loophole, even though it's not really a loophole. It's in there. I mean, it's in the contract. It's not something that's hidden. It's in the CBA. I think every GM saw that and realized that, well, the Giants are trying to trade him. They're trying to waive him. They're trying to do all these things. Let's just let it go. And then he's a free agent and he's going to get his 1.1 million. So maybe we can talk 5 million, 4 million. We could save a couple million, get JD Davis at 4 or 5 because he's already getting paid 1.1 this season.
Right.
So yeah, they're going to get him at a little bit of a bargain, or maybe on a 2-year deal with a lower AAV. All kinds of different things that they can do if they, rather than just grabbing him off of waivers or trading for him and taking on the full salary. Some other things I've seen out there is, if Farhan was able to trade Ross Stripling and eat half of his salary to the A's, why wasn't he able to do that with JD Davis? And maybe there just wasn't enough time. There's not enough, you only have 2 days to make this negotiation with the waiver claim. So maybe that's just what it was. He didn't have the time to make this deal, which again, I don't know. We're not in on all of this stuff. And again, maybe there's a lot of teams that are apprehensive. I mean, we both saw it. We saw the horrendous second half that JD Davis had. It was nothing near his first half. Now, if he can bounce back, and it was only a year ago, if he could bounce back and have a season like he did in the first half of last season.
I mean, he was like that borderline all-star candidate for the Giants in the first
absolutely.
half.
But then after that, just an under 200 hitter, striking out at high fastballs. It was really rough. But again, with the platoons and everything else going on last season, the locker room, the way it was, who knows what was going on. I like JD Davis. I enjoyed watching him. I thought he played some pretty good defense, much better than in the past. And I still think he's a power guy who can hit 25 home runs, maybe even 30 home runs if he's given everyday status at third base.
And I think folks would probably say, if you were to excuse JD's second half, I think he had like a finger injury or something that maybe they credit to his poor second half, but who knows? Yeah. Okay, so now there is a disagreement between the Giants and JD's agent. So Farhan says this loophole, and maybe to Farhan it's not even a loophole. So this idea that if you actually go to arbitration and the money not being guaranteed, Farhan believes that is meant to be a deterrent to negotiations actually reaching the hearing stage. So that is there so that the teams and the players actually come together before actually having to go to arbitration. So for people who don't understand what arbitration is, basically the team has a number that they want to pay. The player has a number that they want to play for, and the judge has to decide which number is the right number. And so it's just like a trial. Like the Giants are going to go, well, look at his second half, just like Brad said. He hit under 200. He struck out so much X, Y, and Z. And on the other side, they're going to say, well, he was a first half near all-star. And it was an actual injury, and he was playing through the injury, and maybe the coaching staff should have given him a rest, or maybe he should have went on the IL. Like that's kind of what I assume what the negotiation is like. And I'm sure it even gets deeper than that. It's like
and it's all closed doors. So unfortunately, we've never, as baseball fans, been able to see this. Which is
maybe fortunately, because
what if it was like
well, every Tuesday, like he didn't stretch with the team, and it's gonna be
Yeah,
like stuff
and
like that.
that's the thing too. They always talk about if you go to arbitration, if you don't settle before arbitration and you go to trial, as a player, your feelings are going to get hurt. You
And
you
yeah,
kind of
and
have
it
to
could
take
hurt,
that out of it, but
and it could hurt the relationship between the
yeah,
player and team based on because you kind of go, oh, that's what they are tracking when they're actually telling me that they're tracking this. They're also looking
right.
at this. Okay, so what was the number that the Giants offered, and what was the number that Team JD wanted? So before, I guess it was about this is coming from the JD side. About an hour before the deadline, so you have to put your numbers in, so that this thing goes to the actual arbitration case. The Giants reached out to JD and offered a little bit under 6.4 million. Now, JD said if they would have offered him 6.55, which is actually what they filed, JD said that they would have agreed to that. Team JD, according to the Giants, didn't want an offer at less than a 7 in front of that number. So the Giants sent their offer to him, like I said, an hour before the deadline. And Team JD, according to the Giants, did not get back to the Giants until 10 minutes before the deadline. So, then Zaidi said they then filed at 6.7 million, or I'm sorry, 6.9 million. And as we just said, Team JD, according to the Giants, wanted that number to start at 7. And several hours after the deadline, they called looking to engage in a settlement. Zaidi then said, we said that out of fairness to our other negotiations and to maintain credibility with our policy going forward, we were not in a position to negotiate once the exchange deadline had passed. Now, my read on that is that if it was a player that they really, really, really wanted, they would have done anything to negotiate, no matter what the
Right.
deadline is.
Yeah.
But because it was JD, and maybe they kind of in their back pocket knew that Chapman was coming, they played a little hardball in that scenario. That is my read. I don't know if that is true or not, but just the way that Zaidi said that, that's what it sounds like to me. And again, this is the business of baseball. I was posting when we read this, and this was really before I understood it. Now, I still think it's part of the dirty side of business. But I tweeted something out that said, so there's a Tribe Called Quest lyric that says, industry
Mhm.
rule number 4080, record companies are shady. And so I tweeted that. I said baseball's version of industry rule number 4080. And this is almost like, it's almost like the loophole is there for the players that the owners or the team, they're just kind of frustrated with it. Now,
Right.
here's what I don't know. Okay. Let's say the Giants won the ARB case. Let's say that number came in at 6.55 instead of 6.9. Could the Giants still void that contract and release him? That's what I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure on that one. Everything I've read, I don't know. Um, yeah, I don't. The whole thing's such a mess, and obviously when things like this happen, we want to blame somebody. I think just all around, everybody kind of has a little bit of blame in this. The agent, JD Davis, Farhan, I think they all kind of obviously, like you said, it could have been done better. If it was Yaz, that was my example the other day. If this was Yaz,
And they're like,
maybe
oh,
they
we need filters. We don't
yeah,
really need
we
third
as
basemans.
and there's probably a priority list. I'm sure there's a priority board, and it goes this, and JD Davis could have been last on that priority board, and that's why he gets such a late number.
Mhm.
Obviously, JD Davis's priority is JD Davis. JD Davis's agent's priority is JD Davis, but Farhan has a list. We want to get these guys taken care of first. They go into our budget. Yaz goes into our budget. Tyro goes into our budget. All these guys got taken care of, and the business was done. And then, like you said too, with JD Davis, it came down to, well, don't know if we need you that much. And that's a really high number. We don't want to spend 7 million on you this season because we're pretty sure you're not going to be here. So here's the deal, and here's how it's going to go. At no point did they throw out to his agent and say, "Oh, by the way, if we go to trial and you win, we're probably going to release him because if we get but again, if they don't get Chapman, they don't release him. So you can't really say that either. So that's why I think a little bit of it on both sides was in good faith. And they're each working for their client, Farhan for the Giants and JD Davis's agent for JD Davis. So they're both working for their client in a negotiation to try to get the best for their client.
Okay, so here's what I also wonder. Does JD Davis's agent go to him and go, "Hey, there is this provision in that if we don't actually reach agreement before the hearing, they could void your contract." Does that conversation happen between player and agent?
If he's a good agent, yeah, I would hope so. I mean, if he's on top of the rules, I mean, an agent kind of has the legality in his pocket, so he should know the CBA inside and out since he's representing a player who is in the CBA. So I would hope that was discussed beforehand. That's a fantastic question for somebody to ask him.
Yeah.
One of these reporters to ask, "Hey, did you know about this clause? And did you discuss this clause before you decided?" But again, the agent is basically saying, "We didn't have time to decide." But Farhan's saying, "You had time to decide, but you came at us with, what was it, 7 minutes left,
Yeah.
10 minutes left in negotiations, and your number was not a number, it has to start with a 7."
Yeah.
So at that point, Farhan's like, "We have more than 10 minutes of negotiation here, so I don't think this is going to work." And again, I'm not siding with one side or the other. I'm just looking at what the he said is on all of this.
Yeah, because if the agent knew that this could be a possibility, I can't, like, the Giants go, okay, 6.4 or 6.35 or whatever that number was. And if you really want 6.9, but you know that they can call your bluff and maybe you don't get 6.9, maybe you go, what about 6.6? And then you kind of work from there to say the number has to start with 7 in order for us to, to come to agreement before this hearing. That sounds to me a little bit like we know what his market is, and his market is going to be bigger than what you guys even see it as.
Right.
And that's what's kind of weird to me, because JD Davis is a good player. I would imagine all the teams who were in on this Matt Chapman thing, they should be chasing JD Davis because he's not the defender that Chapman is.
Right.
He'll probably hit for a higher average. He may not, they may be comparable in power.
Good right-handed DH.
Could right-handed
if you've already
DH.
got a third baseman.
So that is thing. I wish I knew the answer to that question.
Right. And I hate to see him not in our lineup, but again, with Soler and with Chapman now, there is not room for another right-handed bat, because you're not going to platoon him with Chapman at third when you've got a guy like Casey Schmidt who you can plug in there. So it is kind of tough. It's kind of tough. It's just an odd man out situation. And I think Farhan too honestly thought, maybe I can get something for him if other people don't realize this little catch in the CBA. But everybody did. I read all the GMs are pretty smart. They're on top of the CBA. That's their job, and that's why I would hope the agents were in the same situation too, where they were on top of it. But it kind of seemed like his agent felt slighted and like, man, it was there. We didn't know about it because that's not our job. We're just fans. We're not reading the CBA inside and out. We've got enough going on.
Well, here's the other thing. Okay, what if the Giants didn't get Chapman? Are they in the JD Davis game, or are they just so mad that they're looking to trade him?
No, I think they're in. I think
Okay.
he's your starting third baseman.
Okay.
The spring he's having, I mean, he was hitting 400 with a couple of home runs. I think if you don't get Chapman, I mean, he was playing almost every day in spring until the day after Chapman was signed and hadn't played since.
Yeah.
So I think he's our third baseman if the Giants don't get Chapman. So yeah, that's why it's hard to see him go because again, I'm looking at his numbers. His first half numbers last year, he had an OPS plus of 117, which is not fantastic, but it's above average. 117. His April or his March and April, he had an OPS plus of 142 or 138 with 6 home runs and 17 RBIs in the first, month and a week of the season, hit 289, then just kind of fell off and then started to turn it on again when September, October hit and had an OPS plus of 129 and hit 262 with 3 home runs. But if you look at the first half totals, he hit 277 with 11 home runs and that 117 OPS plus. And then the second half, OPS plus of 76. That's well below average.
Mhm.
And hit only 207. I thought it was under 200, but just 207. But again, the potential's there, and if he could play every day, there's Susan Slusser wrote another article about the platoon situation that the outfielders were in last year. Nice little interview with Yaz and Conforto talking about how they're excited to be able to play every day again because that's where they thrive. And I'm sure JD Davis, if he can get into a situation where he can play third base every single day, 100, let's say 150 games, 145 games in the season, I think maybe he might have a nice little season.